in the professional wrestling, try to implement them in the professional wrestling space so that we can have more mental health resources, more communication between us, and more community, so that we all don't have to suffer, and at least we don't have to suffer while we're feeling alone. And so that was my goal with all of this. And that led me to finding Carl, who is better known in many circles as Dr. Carl, but he's got a master's from Penn State. He's a licensed therapist, and he is one of our group facilitators. So we have 2 support groups right now that are specifically for professional wrestlers. Carl leads one, and Kyle leads the other one. Carl works as a wrestling manager as well, which is very important because both of our facilitators are in professional wrestling, so they know the complexities and the dynamics of professional wrestling, as well as the mental health knowledge, and they're experts in both areas. So it allows for the conversation and the community and the education to be better. And then we have Kyle Henry. He's a master's student in clinical health psychology at Roosevelt University. He's also one of our group facilitators for the support groups that I mentioned. He is also the chief of beef, which I think is an amazing name. Chief of beef, Hunk Cassidy. Let's go. He's part of a tag team called Killdozer with Freelance and the Jacobs Pritchard Wrestling Academy. So like I said, experts in the mental health field, also inside of and doing the grind of the professional wrestling industry. So they're experts in the area. They're going to lead you through this seminar, through anxiety, coping strategies, and we're going to end with some resources at the end. And then we can talk about at the end how you can join these support groups if you feel so inclined to. I'm also going to put a link in the chat for the Facebook group that I've started, which is basically the YouAreLoved professional wrestling support community, where I post reflections, prompts, worksheets, and it allows for you to be in a group with other people who know what you're feeling. And that will lead to some other different stuff that we have working on, which I will mention when it becomes more concrete. But that's a group that I'll put in the chat. And if you have any questions throughout this, put them in the chat. I'll be looking at that, and we can address those if need be head on directly during the chat, or we can circle back to them at the end. And again, this is also the first of its kind. Like, there's never been anything like this in professional wrestling, as far as I know. And so we are trying our best. We're not perfect. We aim to be the best we can be. So feedback and constructive criticism is highly encouraged. We're trying our best to support you guys and support everyone in professional wrestling, but there's only 3 of us, and we're just getting started, and this is the first thing we're doing. So cheers. Thank you for being here. It really means a lot to me and to Kyle and to Carl. And let's get to the meat and bones, baby.
All right. I will start us off. As Aaron said, I am Kyle Henry. I am also the chief of beef, Hunk Cassidy. Especially if you're in the Midwest, you will see me around at places. I definitely get out there, and I like to wrestle. Hopefully I see all of you out there in some form or another. But as Aaron said, meat and bones, baby. What is anxiety? Anxiety is anything with excessive worrying more days than not. So there's 7 days in a week. If you're worrying 4 days, that's more days than not. This tends to be over a period of 6 months. The individual is unable to control that worry. So even when you want to think about something else, you have difficulty getting away from these thoughts of worrying. All right. It can cause feelings of restlessness, even nausea, irritability, muscle tension, and sleep disturbances. Anxiety has real physical consequences, even though this is something that is, hypothetically just in our heads. These behaviors can also cause impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. The way I see it, and the way I see this symptom pop up in professional wrestling, I have seen a lot of people who have problems with the handshake idea, the idea of going up and introducing yourselves to absolutely everybody at the show. A lot of people get anxiety about that, especially when it comes to things about recalling names and remembering people's names and remembering what they do and who they are and all those things. And the other important aspect of what anxiety is it's not attributable to any physical effects. All right. Yeah. How does, I can't even see my own slide. Yeah. How does anxiety work? There's a bunch of ways anxiety works. There's a number of factors that cause anxiety. For a lot of people, it's chemical imbalances in under or overactive sections in the brain that elicit feelings, behaviors, and emotions that make up anxiety. All right. It's the area of the brain that is most associated with compulsive behaviors and fear and worry and things like that of that nature. Those types of emotions is the amygdala. Without boring you guys about too much neuroscience stuff, if you'll pay attention to Carl's screen, he's pointing where the amygdala is. Yeah, if that part of the brain is way too overactive for you, if there's some sort of minute chemical imbalance, you might experience anxiety. And that anxiety will present different from everybody. For some people, it makes you a complete wallflower. It makes it very hard for you to talk to people. For others, well, it makes you a bit of a chatty Cathy. You talk too much, you overshare. It depends and varies on just a countless number of factors. It really does. There is a distinction I would like you guys to really take away from the seminar, in that panic and anxiety are two very different things. Where anxiety is very internalized and it's focused on feelings of worry for a prolonged set of time, panic tends to be the more externalized, because what panic does, it has essentially caused your fight, flight, or freeze response to activate. So what does this look like? You get the urge to run, or at least start moving in some fashion or another. You get heart palpitations all the way to chest pain. Again, like anxiety, symptoms of panic can vary. So heart palpitations all the way up to chest pain. You can start sweating a lot. You have trouble you start overheating. You have trouble cooling down. You start shaking. You start trembling. For some people, it can feel like you're choking, like your throat's starting to close up. You have an inability to breathe. You start hyperventilating. It can also cause nausea and abdominal issues. So like I said, where anxiety is internalized, panic is externalized. You can
think of it kind of like, Bambi. How does Bambi look when startled? First, it might be Bambi's, oh, I got to fight back, rears back, maybe tail goes up right away and runs. Or maybe like when a deer jumps out in front of your car, it just freezes in front of the headlights. So people react in these exact same ways to either trauma or anxiety, or, like in this case, panic. Something has happened to where you cannot control your reaction.
Exactly. Now, we talked about some of the bones. Let's talk about the meat. How does wrestling impact, or how does anxiety impact wrestling? My jokes are throwing me off. You are standing in front of a crowd in what is essentially your underwear and throwing your friends and yourself around. Anxiety comes with the job. I think for the most part, everybody in here can relate to the feeling of standing in that ring and having everybody stare at you. It's a very, very weird feeling to hold the attention of an entire room, especially if you are in your skivvies and you're dealing with any number of factors going on in the room. So why is it important to make this acknowledgement? Learning to manage it will help you become more holistically complete as a performer. What does holistically mean? The whole thing. All right. We can sit there, we can talk about psychology and ability to perform and footwork and how crisp your spots are and whatnot. What you also, when you're thinking about being a great performer, you got to think about how things operate up here, what your mindset's like, things of that nature. Look at the entire picture. Not learning to manage these things will significantly impact your ability to enjoy the journey And when it's all said and done, when we can no longer do this, because if there's one thing that everybody has in common in professional wrestling is that it ends, unless you're Ric Flair for some reason. And when that time comes, what we hope for all of you is that you're able to look back and smile, that you're able to really think about those times and not think about how you puked before you even got out to the ring and how nervous you were. I mean, that's fine for everybody's first match. I mean, I get it. Been there. I've seen plenty of people that be there, but when it's your 100th and you've got this thing down and you're still trembling in your boots before you go out to the curtain, still feeling like, you know, you're going to forget everything and blow up, that's when something's off. That's when something doesn't seem to be clicking. That's when we got to look at the whole holistic picture, because we want you to enjoy it.
Feel like that. It does not have to feel that way.
Yeah, you shouldn't be going out there feeling scared. You should not be afraid of this thing that you enjoy. Which brings us to coping methods. Coping methods are my favorite thing in the world. My favorite coping method, by God, is professional wrestling. And I'll tell you exactly why. And I tell this to other therapists. I tell this to other students in my program. I love seeing the looks on people's faces. There is nothing sweeter than picking somebody up, slamming them on the mat, and dropping an elbow on them. That kind of stuff is the most satisfying thing in the world, especially if you pop it off and the crowd goes nuts. You can't replicate a feeling like that. That is lightning in a bottle. It's magic. That part is what we want you people to recall when it's all said and done. Do you see the smile on my face? I'm not even talking about a specific thing I did. I'm just talking about an action and how much enjoyment I get out of it. That's what we want for you. Now, the actual act of wrestling can be very fun. However, we all know that there is a lot more that goes on with professional wrestling besides just the stuff in between the ropes. And you all know how to do the stuff in between the ropes. That's not necessarily the part that causes the anxiety. Nevertheless, let's talk about coping behaviors. Methodologies with coping are behaviors that help us deal with negative thoughts, both in the midst of and after we experience them. Mindfulness is the awareness of our thoughts and cognitions. All right. Carl, let's throw it back to grad school for you. Can you define a cognition?
Cognition is really just the way that you think about things. Mm-hmm. Your cognitive abilities is being able to process the information that's coming in. Your worldview has a lot to do with that. The way that maybe you're a pessimist, maybe you're an optimist, you know, and throughout your life, your cognitive abilities can change, you know. So being able to remember things, being able to take what you know and apply it, being productive. And that's when we can diagnose something, is when cognitively you can't handle it, right?
Right. Now, the thing with coping methodologies is they can take many forms and be executed, and that should be say ways, not forms. It can be executed in many different ways. The example I just gave, pro wrestling, is one example of coping methodology. Now, the thing that all these methods, even though that they might be different and present themselves in different ways, they are all attained and maintained through diligent, intentional practice. If you take nothing else away about coping methodology, take away this acronym, DIP. You need to deal with something. You got to go work some shit out. Throw a dip in, brother. Diligent, intentional practice. I keep saying this. I've been saying it for a week and I keep messing it up. It's intentional practice, not intelligent, intentional. Diligent. You keep on doing it and you do it consistently. Intentional. You know why you're doing this. You are doing this for an exact reason, and it is as a coping skill. Practice. You're all trained professional wrestlers. You know what practice is. It takes consistency. It takes intention and having a reason for doing it. And it takes more consistency, more doing it, more actionable action, right?
And this sounds exactly like working out. This is the same as if you were trying to get a physique or achieve some goal in athleticism. Because your cognitive abilities are also a muscle. You can strengthen them, or they can get weaker over time. It's really up to you. There are sometimes things that might get in the way of that, like, you know, some diagnoses, some more serious diagnoses that are medical issues maybe. But overall, most people can improve their cognitive abilities and take more control of their thoughts.
So that brings us to our next point, examples of coping methodology. For this first part, I'm going to talk about stuff that's mostly that you can do in the moment, things that you have control of no matter what scenario, situation, or place you're in. The first one I want to talk about is deep breathing. For this one, when I talk to people about it as a coping methodology, as a coping method, I get a lot of rolled eyes, and I think I saw a couple even just talking about it now. Deep breathing sounds like it's bullshit, but it's not. If executed correctly, it's actually an internal reset button on your nervous system. So with anxiety and panic and things that have very palpable effects on your nervous system, this is a huge, very effective tool. And I'm going to demonstrate this for you. Now, as you can see here on the screen, it says a minimum of 3 seconds in, 3 second hold, 3 second release. If you ever watched any sort of meditation videos, things like that, and watched a real master of deep breathing techniques, they'll hold in for about 10 seconds. I'm a big fan of exaggerating the entire process. So I invite you all to do this with me. I'm going to give you an example of what a deep breathing exercise looks like. So everybody with me, just exhale, push it out. Clear your lungs. Now breathe in. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Hold. Now release. 1, 2, 3. Now, if you've done this correctly, it doesn't feel like all that different from taking a rip from the bong, except you're not going to cough afterwards. You should feel all the tension release from your torso. You should feel yourself visibly relax. You should be able to slump back a little bit like, whoa. You should feel a little bit of blood rush into your head. All right? It's just, and you repeat it as many times as necessary until you reach the state that you want, to where you can think clearly, to where you can control your breathing. All right. So if you're in a situation where, let's say you're about to go out, music's hitting, you suddenly forgot all the spots in your match, take a deep breath, breathe out, take another one, breathe out, and don't go until you remember what you want to remember, at least feel like, okay, I'm not going to completely fuck this up. Okay, this is a reset button, and if you work at it, it will work for you. The next thing is progressive muscle relaxation. Those of you guys who are, body guys, really like testing out your muscles, and like me, I'm a fidgeter. I am a massive fidgeter. Something's always constantly moving with me, especially my legs. This is why this one's real good for me. I also recommend it pre-match because it's also kind of a good warm-up. You start at your toes, you dig them in through your shoes, through your boots, just so you feel your calves start to squeeze, and then you work your way up. All right. You hold each muscle group for about 3 seconds, 3 to 5, and then you release. All right. You let that tension melt away as you release. Then you work up to your thighs, then to your abs and your hips, and then to your stomach, and then to your chest, your shoulders, your biceps, and then your neck. You activate all those muscle groups, and then you let the tension relax away. All right. very good for activating all your muscle groups pre-match. It gives you something to focus on besides just these worrying, anxious thoughts that we might have. And it gives you an idea of like what to focus on with your own body, how your own feeling, how dialed into yourself you are. Also, don't squeeze too hard, because the worst thing you want to do before a match is give yourself a cramp. All right. Now, moving on. These examples tend to be things that you can do out of the moment. Like you've experienced a bout of anxiety, you deal with anxiety, and you want to start actively working on your anxiety. One thing you can do is start challenging your irrational thoughts. Now, if you've gone through weeks, months, years of pro wrestling training and you're about to have your first match, a lot of people understandably have some anxious thoughts, maybe a lot of them revolving around, oh, I'm going to mess this up or I'm going to blow up. Why? Sincerely, ask yourself why you are feeling that way and what evidence there is for you to be feeling that way. If you have gone through diligent, respectable, because I know there's some training out there that's very lackluster. If you've gone through the camps and you've put in the work and you've put in the work, and trust me, because you'll be walking out with your shirt soaked in sweat every single practice. What understandable reason do you have to really doubt yourself? If you put yourself in front of people who have made money doing this and you've gotten respectable feedback and great critiques from them, what reason do you have to doubt your own ability? And you have every single right to challenge yourself on that. Yes, it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay. It's not okay to just bask in it and give into that anxiety, into that doubt. There's no reason for you to doubt yourself, and you really should challenge yourself on that. As it says here, you're your best advocate. Put those thoughts on trial. You have been through weeks, months, and years of training and study in preparation for your craft. Now, I talked a little bit there about working with other people and accepting feedback and critique. Now, the way we talk about ourselves and the way we critique ourselves, that we absolutely have control over. Sit there and really think about it. Just a show of hands. Is there anybody afraid to really watch their matches back or watch themselves in the ring? Can you think about why? You don't have to tell us why. You don't have to tell the group, but think about why, and think about when you do watch those matches back, when you are watching yourself, when you are taking feedback, how are you talking to yourself? Are you taking critiques and whatnot and going, okay, you know what? I can work on that and ask for more information and ask for more coaching? Or are you putting yourself down? Are you going, oh, I'm such a fucking idiot for doing that? We all make boneheaded mistakes. This is a performance-based endeavor. And we do stuff even when we're not in practice in uncontrolled environments that, you know what, frankly, makes us look dumb. Shit goes off the rails. How do you critique yourself when things go off the rails? Because the mark of a great professional wrestler is when things go wrong, they are able to adapt and move on right through it as if nothing happened at all. And I think we're all mature enough in understanding what professional wrestling is to understand that. Like, if you listen to a podcast, guy talks about a match and he'll be like, oh, we fucked this part up and but thankfully nobody saw, we got it all back together. That happens all the time. That's just the mark of being one of the greats and being very competent at this job. So there's no reason for you to sit there and beat yourself up. The ring and the bumps are already doing it for us. You don't need to pile on yourself too. The further example of that is think about the people that you are surrounding yourself with. How are they critiquing you? How are they talking about you? How are they talking about themselves? How are they talking about people who aren't you or them? Is it an environment that's honestly real good for your mental health? Or is it contributing to the negative thoughts about yourself? Do you feel like there's going to be consequences for you screwing up outside of somebody saying boo or somebody yelling, oh, wrestling's fake? Well, that shouldn't necessarily be happening. It's not good for you. It's not helping you. You need to take stock of how you're talking to yourself and how other people are talking to you. And if it's actually helping you or if it's discouraging you. And from there, you take stock about who you really want in your circle, who you want around you, and who you want to go on this journey with. One of the last big picture coping skills is imagery. And there really is something to be said about manifesting the outcomes that you want. There really is. As I mentioned before, you've all been through training. You've been through months, years, decades of training in some cases. What you have gone through this training with the ability to execute certain maneuvers, certain spots, certain what you're able to do the job. You wouldn't have got through training if you weren't able to do everything. And I mean, not everybody has to do everything in the ring, but that's an entire different argument. But you've gotten through training. You should, when approaching a match, as an example, when approaching a match, you should be imagining all the stuff that you've called. If you happen to be one of those people that still calls matches, you should be manifesting the outcomes that you want and imagining yourself executing. Ask yourself, what makes you think about messing something up over imagining yourself executing and succeeding? Why is the thought of messing something up more or easier to think about and ruminate on than it is to imagine yourself succeeding and executing correctly? Frankly, for me, that's a huge one, especially, if you're somebody who does more high spots and whatnot, things of that nature. If you do super complex moves like the double pump handle orange crush or some of that happy horse shit, God bless you. But dude, you can't sit there and be doubting yourself. You can't half-ass think you're going to get a poison rana on somebody. Brother, you got to go for it, and you got to imagine yourself succeeding. Otherwise, somebody's going to end up on your head. You just give yourself that much more of an ability to succeed when you do these things. The final part with coping methodology, specifically in relation to professional wrestling, is just gaining experience. From a psychological standpoint, dealing with anxiety, the primary tool in the box is gradual exposure. So for the example that I've wrote here, we're going to use blowing up in the ring. If you're scared of blowing up in the ring, how do we prevent that? By blowing ourselves up in a controlled, safe environment with people that we want to work with, who are going to push us and critique us and provide us with positive feedback. You're not just going to go out and have a dozen matches and progressively blow yourself up in front of more and more crowds. No, you're going to go to practice and you're going to do a hard drill. Then you're going to take the night off. Next week, you're going to go back, do two hard drills. Week 3 more hard drills, so on and so forth, until you're comfortable with the idea that you can go out there, do this thing, and not blow up. It's a gradual process. Fear extinction occurs when a feared stimulus, in this case blowing up, is presented repeatedly without any aversive consequences. That's why you go blow up in practice, because there's no real consequences to puking in a garbage can in some shitty little gym in Paulsboro, New Jersey, than there is throwing up in front of a group of people because you're 8 minutes into a 15-minute match and you've blown up. There's a distinct difference. Get in the gym, do the drills, all right? Also, get out there and get matches. There's very little antidote about for a fear of being in front of a crowd than just getting out there and doing your thing in front of a crowd. It doesn't have to be a huge show. You don't have to go out there in front of 500 people. You don't have to try and get booked on all these huge shows that get a lot of exposure and a lot of views, just get out there and do your thing. Go wrestle in front of 5 people. You'll be okay. It's not that big of a deal. Just go ply your craft, get the reps in. That will do a ton for your anxiety. Now, things that exacerbate anxiety. This is a real fun one. What does exacerbate mean? It means it intensifies or it makes worse. Drugs are a huge one with anxiety, specifically because, as me and Carl earlier talked about, drugs do affect the brain, specifically the amygdala. It also affects your ability to produce dopamine, serotonin. These are the neurotransmitters that allow us to feel joy. All right, happiness, that sort of emotion. So, Carl, you want to say something?
Alcohol is a depressant. So automatically, if you're not feeling so great, this is going to slow you down even more. You're not going to have as much control. And I think a huge theme tonight has been control. We get anxiety because we feel that we have none. These are some amazing tools that actually, when you feel hopeless or helpless, just try one. You never know. Because if you don't have anything else, this is what you can go
to. A big one, especially around professional wrestling, is marijuana. If you see me at a show, there is a good chance that I have a joint on me. I am a big proponent of marijuana, and I love the idea that people are turning to that as opposed to the opioids, the pain pills, that people are being more diligent about what they put in their bodies to recover from what we're doing. And as a professional wrestler, you have to be diligent and intentional about how you recover and how you take care of your body. So yeah, a lot of people are turning to marijuana. There's the edibles, the joints, the whatnot. A lot of people at these shows, they have the vape pens. It is what it is. However, despite all the pluses that it might have over opioids, marijuana is still a depressant and it still affects your brain. And if you become, even though this isn't exactly popular to say, while it doesn't have any sort of physical dependency in the way that heroin or cocaine or methamphetamines do, you can still become dependent on marijuana. There are still consequences and dependency issues that come along with marijuana. And it tends to be a sign of larger psychological issues. So if you're hitting a bowl after work and just using it to calm down, that's one thing. You take a vape after you get a workout in after training, sure. If you're chiefing 7 blunts a day, dude, that's not good for you. That's no longer taking care of your body. That's a whole different conversation. Now, on the opposite side of this is the stimulants. For us as pro wrestlers, I know it's not necessarily the 80s anymore, but the Coke is still out there. There's still people who, are shoving stuff up their nose and going out and having a match. And, it is what it is. You can't necessarily be there to police everybody's behavior. And frankly, these guys are still able to do the job, even hopped up, and regardless how we feel about it. But in relation to anxiety, these things definitely exacerbate feelings of anxiety. It's the pre-workout. There's Coke and amphetamines and the pills and the Xanax no, not the Xanax, the Ritalin and all the other stimulants and whatnot. But even things like pre-workout, the energy drinks, those can really help you, or not necessarily help, but get you fixated and ruminating on these anxious thoughts that you may be experiencing, because the idea of taking caffeine and pre-workout is get yourself focused, get dialed in, brother. But you're focused and dialed in on the things that are causing you this excessive worry. And now you're just worried and very energetic. All right. So my advice to you is, if you're one of those energy drink guys, you know, maybe not every day, maybe just once a day. Figure out where you can maybe start cutting these things down a little bit, and or maybe find alternative sources of energy, a lot of B vitamin stuff, healthy eating, things of that nature. Moving on from substances, head injuries. We are prime candidates for traumatic brain injuries and concussions. We are. For the love of God, protect your heads. I know the state of the indies. 2 weeks ago, I took 8 super kicks in one match because they couldn't figure out how to bump me otherwise. I'm a big dude. But I can't say it enough. Get that hand up. Highlight reels and GIFs and all that stuff. Yeah, it gets people over, but do you really need the internet likes at the expense of your cognitive functioning? These brain injuries will eventually take their toll. They will affect you neurologically, and they will affect your personality and the way you think and the way you feel. So I know that head injuries are definitely, they come with the territory and they sometimes cannot be avoided, but get your hand up, protect your face, protect your head, and don't be afraid to say no to pile drivers and, these big ass bumps where it's causing whiplash and it's causing your head to bounce off the mat, especially if it's not a big show and the payday is not there. How much do you need to show out? How much do you need to put your own health at risk for a maybe? I mean, unless the money's already there, that's one thing. If you're going to be adequately taken care of for taking that kind of bump, yes, that's one thing. But for most of us, I think all of us in here, this is the indies. There's no guarantee that you will be taken care of for the risks that you take. So please calculate those risks carefully. Now, the last thing is burnout. And a little bit before we started, I know Carl had brought up this point, is that a lot of people are feeling like they aren't necessarily doing enough. The pandemic's still happening. The business is still very slow. And what things look like now is that people aren't necessarily traveling like they used to. I mean, some are, especially at the higher levels. But the best way for you to get reps in and now is these local promotions have to have something going on week to week. They have to start creating their own, content productions to get something out and get people opportunities. You just can't necessarily trust COVID protocols to get out there like we used to. But even so, there are still people who are picking up bookings every weekend, or at least trying to get out there. So even if they're not booked, they're still going to shows and networking and trying to get out there. Take a weekend off. Don't be afraid to take a weekend off. And don't be afraid to let yourself heal and let yourself rest. Especially if you have taken some sort of head injury or anything that you might suspect may become an issue. It's not a bad thing to take care of yourself. You are not on somebody else's schedule. You are an independent wrestler. You are allowed to operate independently. And that means if you want to take care of yourself or feel that you should, nobody can give you any real guff about that. Nobody can really tell you no. And if they do, you can go work for somebody else. That is the flexibility and enjoyment we have. Even if you are a contracted performer, if you are good enough to get a contract at one place, you are good enough to get a contract at another place. Don't be afraid to tell people no, and you need time off to heal. This last bit here I want to talk about is just having a foundation here. And if you'll recognize this pyramid right here, this is something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, Abraham Maslow was a psychologist from some time ago who recognized that in order to elicit certain behaviors or to get certain performances out of people, they have to be provided, or their needs have to be provided for, rather. As you can see here, we're reading it from the bottom to the top. You got your physiological, basic stuff, breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. Yes, having a place to safely take a shit is important. All right. In order to be a professional wrestler, yeah, you need some place to go. You need to have a roof over your head. I know there's podcasts out there with guys like Darby Allin who are like, okay, well, I lived out of my car in Planet Fitness for 2 years of my life while I wrestled for Evolve. Good for Darby Allin. I'm willing to bet he wasn't exactly happy during. And I'm willing to bet that affected him a little more than he let on in a podcast interview. Second level, safety, security of body, of employment, of resources, of morality, of the family, of health, of property. All right. You want to make sure when you head out on the road for the weekend and you go take a booking, that your entire life's not going to fall apart, that you're not going to lose your job, that you're not going to lose your house, that you're not going to lose your income. Nobody's going to be mad at you about it. It's not going to affect your family, and it's not going to affect your health. All right. You want all that stuff taken care of. You also want to make sure love and belonging are taken care of. Do you have a good group of friends? Or do you have a good group of friends in wrestling? How about outside of wrestling? What's your relationship like with your family? What's your romantic life like? All of these things are things that we must address before we can even get into a place where we can even begin thinking about getting out there and wrestling. And that's the esteem and the self-actualization portions. Wrestling helps us. Wrestling is a projection of our self-esteem, of our confidence, of our achievement, of the respect of other people, and respect by other people. That's exactly what wrestling is. It's a practice in esteem and getting other people to have esteem for us and presenting the esteem that we have for ourselves and other people. All right. It's all in the presentation. There's the self-actualization portion of it. Sure, there's getting out in front of a crowd, but it's also presenting you, all right, your morality, your creativity, your ability to problem solve and be spontaneous, your prejudices or lack thereof, hopefully lack thereof, and your ability to accept facts. All right. All these things are extremely important. And in order to really get a fulfilling experience in pro wrestling, this is the kind of foundation you have to have underneath you. If something's lacking, it's probably going to affect you on a holistic level. All right. So please learn Maslow's hierarchy of needs, live it, love it.
It's another example of how to take control.
Mm-hmm.
It's another way that you get to be in charge of your career, because nobody else decides this. You're an independent contractor. So it's your business. Balance makes everything happen.
All right.
So I think it's important, excuse me, to note that when we start talking about mental health and dealing with anxiety and things of that nature, that it takes practice, right? So you want to start implementing these strategies when you're outside of a crisis, so that when you do potentially get into a crisis, however you define crisis, that you've already tried some of these things and that you know what to fall back on immediately. So you want to try the breathing mechanisms, the meditation, the journaling, the muscle relaxation, all of these things in your everyday life, for your job, before you meet your family, or before you go out to dinner with your partner, whatever the case may be. Whenever you're feeling a little anxious or your mental health is starting to wane a little bit, you want to implement these practices immediately so that you can start to develop this mental health toolkit that you can pick and choose when you need it, when you fall into a crisis. And it's also important to note that when you start really diligently and intentionally taking care of your mental health, you're never exonerated from the work, right? You're always going to have to keep practicing it over and over and over again, because our mental health comes in waves, up and down. And some days we feel really good, some days we don't. And some days there's no, investigative reason why we don't feel that way. It's just a mad day. And so we have to keep putting in this practice on a daily basis because we're never there. We're not exonerated from the work, right? So it's a daily practice about knowing that you yourself, the person, hold deep intrinsic value, and you have to start treating yourself like someone that you love because you deserve that love from yourself first and foremost. So I think that's important to note. And then Carl's going to take it away. We're going to talk about some resources now to kind of wrap this last portion up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackson. I'm very passionate about mental health, as all of you know. I've been working in it for several years now, and I've worked some really hairy jobs. I've worked crisis, I've worked outpatient, I've worked with really high-risk clients. So I know how to kind of navigate the system, and I like to give that away to people. Safety planning is really important. Even if you feel like you've got a good handle on things, it doesn't hurt to go out and plan for what might happen. I like to live by, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So let's get into what safety planning is. It's a plan to help you stay in control. The theme we've seen throughout tonight is control. If you don't have it, you're not going to be too happy. And the way you do that is recognizing what you do have control of. Your choices, your thoughts. We cannot control what anybody else does. If you haven't heard of it, there's a thing called the living will. It's something, and I recommend that really honestly, anybody in the professional wrestling business should get one. It is if you were to get injured in a capacity that you could not make medical choices for yourself. So for instance, you get hit in the head or you get in a car accident and you're brain dead and you're hooked up to machines. You want your loved ones to know, hey, this is how I want to be treated. This is what I want for my life. And it opens up that dialogue. It helps others to know what your choices would be when you can't choose. And we want to practice these things. We want to think about them. It's muscle memory, just like learning a body slam. You got to practice it 100 times before you can really be confident with it. And this isn't just for mental health crisis. This is for everyday struggles. You might come across somebody else that needs this help. Traumas happen all the time. Trauma is my bread and butter. I think that trauma plays into so much of how we feel and what we think. So, and that happens all the time in everybody's life. Death is a huge trauma. So recognizing the stages of grief, it might be from family, it might be a parent, you might lose a child, you might lose your significant other, you might lose a friend that in this business, because unfortunately we see that all too often, which is even more of a reason that we have to do this. You might lose a pet, and that is a huge part of people's lives. That is something to grieve over. Don't be so hard on yourself to think that you can't take time to feel what you feel. It might be biological or genetic. Different mental disorders come on at different times in your life. Schizophrenia doesn't always display early in life. In young men, it's in their early 20s. It's early on. In women, it can present later on when they're middle-aged. These are things that we have to consider and be prepared for. Addiction can occur too, and that's also a biological aspect, or you become dependent. Then you don't know, you're spending your money on drugs, you're not being able to control your life. And like I said, to help someone else. Are you a parent and your child might be in trouble? This is a way to think about how can you help them? Here's some things to consider when you're making a safety plan. I sit down with my clients and I write it out and I help them to practice it. Recognize what your triggers are. Is there something that reminds you of your past? Is there something that has happened to you that when you relive it or you might have memories of it, they cause you to be upset and make bad choices? How do you display this? Maybe you shut down. Maybe you just don't talk to anybody and you shut everybody out, which then creates that internal dialogue that nobody likes me, I'm not loved, I'm not worthy. So we have to figure out how do you start to feel better then? How do you start to use these coping skills, even if they feel silly? I think that they are so important. Taking a deep breath before you make a choice could help you make the right choice. And I think it's worth taking that one moment before you have to make a choice. Most of all, I think connection with others is really good medicine. If you're feeling alone, reach out, talk about it, find someone you care about, and then tell them that they are that person. Figure out who can help you. Tell them, because there's never been a situation where somebody died and I didn't hear. Man, I wish that I had known. I wish there was some way that I could have been there for them. But we don't know unless we tell the people how they can be there for us. It's so important. Share your plan with them. Come up with how they're going to know if you're not okay. If they haven't heard from you in a month. Well, what's going on, man? How come I haven't heard from you? Is something happening? Checking in on yourself, recognizing where you're at. Maybe you've just been sad lately. This stuff can snowball. Anxiety can snowball into panic. You have to be aware of these things, and just like Dick, you have to be focused in how you attack these things. Help them to understand your behaviors, or give a keyword. Like maybe you can't explain what's going on and you're not okay, but you can say purple monkey dishwasher, and that to your friends means, okay, I'm going to come over and hang out and make sure that you're doing okay. You don't even have to talk about anything. You're just there for the person. I'm including a list of resources here as well. Again, this isn't just for us. It's not just for how we treat ourselves. It's how we can help others too. I have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can call that, it's toll-free. Child Help, National Child Abuse Hotline. You suspect that there's somebody in trouble, you can anonymously make these calls. Do it, you can save a life. There's a text line here. We have disaster distress. We see this stuff on the news all the time. Disasters can happen at any time. You could lose it all like that. So be ready, be prepared. Don't get caught off guard, especially when there's no reason to. Gambling, it can be a real addiction. It can take things over, and then you start to spiral. You lose that control. I included the Spanish hotline there, domestic violence hotline, the sexual assault hotline. These are things, again, that help us to protect each other and to get out of really bad situations so you can start feeling better. Just a couple other options there. And the Veterans Crisis Line, I was in the Army for 5 years. I've lost a lot of friends to suicide from that. So I take this very seriously. When people contact me, I do my best to be there for them. And that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this, to be a part of what Jackson has started, brought me on board, and now Kyle has become just another wonderful asset. I love his energy. I love his spirit. This is something that I've always wanted to do, to take the two things I love, professional wrestling that got me through really hard times, and mental health, practices and the things that I have worked really hard to learn, bringing them together, and we get to change this business. We get to be the tip of the spear, the front line of changing the perception of mental health in professional wrestling and potentially saving lives. There's a ripple effect for all of this. You guys being here has been very important. And I want to thank everybody for giving us their time. I know we don't have a lot of it. So the fact that you chose to spend this with us, I hope you will again in the future. Either in the support groups that we host once a month, or in these webinars that we're hopefully going to be hosting now every other month. I am just so excited for what we can do. I look forward to hearing feedback. I look forward to helping people. If you need help to develop a safety plan, if you need examples, reach out to me. I'm on Twitter, Dr. Carl Martin, really easy to find. I check my DMs on the daily. And thank you again for your time. I'm going to turn it back to Jackson.
Fantastic. Before we wrap up, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, anecdotes, funny stories? Please share.
To speak back to the part about watching your own matches,
Mm.
it's for me, it starts with I never have there's one thing that goes wrong in the match. It's like the whole match is bad.
Mhm.
I know that's not a positive mindset, but I'm not sure I know there's not a perfect match. So I don't understand why do I look at it like that?
You can look at it like this. You can look at it, ask yourself 3 questions every time you watch a match. What did I do well? Write it down. What can I improve on? Write it down. And how can I do it? Well, better, how? Okay, I train a lot of athletes, college and professional athletes, and after every game or practice, that's what they do. What did I do really well? Tell yourself, write it down. I did that shit. Fuck yeah. What can I improve on? We're trying to get better. So we're going to improve on something. And then how do we do it? And that's how you should watch, not should, but that's how potentially you could watch your matches in a more positive, optimistic way. At least that's what I believe to be true.
To give you an example, Adam, a few weeks ago, I wrestled for Ricky Morton's promotion, and it was my second match as a tag team with my good buddy Brendan. We went through the match perfectly fine. We were the heels. We're putting the heat on the guy, whatever. I pick him up. I tell him, duck the clothesline, go for a sunset flip. Throw him off, go to set up my clothesline. And when I throw my clotheslines, I like to send them at people's heads to remind them to duck. He didn't duck. He pre-bumped. And now I'm on IWTV sending a clothesline sailing over somebody's head. And it was right in front of the camera. They caught every bit of it. I'm still beating myself up to this day. However, I realized what was wrong, and next time I'm just going to aim it right for his chest and throw it like a normal clothesline because I know better. And that's what I should have done. And then I went back and I watched the match after I complained about it to, my tag partner and our manager and our other buddy who was in the car. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. But I realized exactly why it sucked and what I could do different next time. It was just throw a clothesline right at his chest as we are trained to do. As such, like I watched the match back, I realized, you know what? We put the heat on real well on these guys. We were talking to each other. We were doing everything we wanted to do right and improve on in a small show and really come together and become cohesive as a team. So while I fucked up one thing, we made strides towards cohesion as a team. You got to look for the positives that you can take away. Yeah, there's one glaring mistake in the match, but you know what? We also live in the era where the outcome or the entirety of the match doesn't dictate whether it's good. We live in the GIF and highlight reel era. You pick around what you screwed up, show the rest of it to the world, and then just clean up and work on what you screwed up and just keep moving forward, man.
And just like I think any good worker in professional wrestling, highlight your strengths, limit your weaknesses. If you find, okay, this is a pattern, recognizing patterns is so important. And if that's just not working, recognize that and accepting it. Like, you deserve to enjoy watching the matches because a lot of other people do too.
Anyone else have any questions, follow-ups? Need some further information? Anything else? And then I have some last minute things I'll say, but just want to open the floor a little bit. Okay. Love the thought of deserving to enjoy our own matches. Really good sentiment. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Well,
for everybody to enjoy, you should enjoy it too. Come on.
Yeah. It's a beauty. It's a beautiful thing.
We're in the entertainment business. Entertain yourself too.
So yeah, to wrap us up, thank you guys so much for joining us. on this first ever You Are Loved professional wrestling mental health webinar. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it went amazing. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to individually message me or drop it in the chat right now or share your thoughts openly here, that would be awesome. But I did post some links in the chat. One is to the Facebook group that I mentioned earlier, which is just a community of professional wrestlers. We post reflections, journal prompts, questions, worksheets, all based around mental health. And then that's going to lead to some peer-led monthly check-in groups, which will go in junction with our support groups, which are led by Kyle and Carl. And if you'd like to join those, DM me on Twitter and we'll find out which day works better for you, a Wednesday or a Sunday, and we'll throw you in those groups, which will be in March. And then I also posted a link to NAMI, which is National Alliance on Mental Illness. They do support groups also a little bit more regular than we do. And so if you need further help or want some more guidance or want more community, those are really good resources, and they're from state to state. So you kind of pick your state and go from there. And then if you are deeply struggling and kind of really need help right now, please message me as well. We can get you set up with stuff. My organization can sponsor your treatment if financial is a barrier or whatever the case may be. We can help you. Message any of us. But that's all I have to say, really. Yeah, that's all I have to say, really. Again, thank you so much. Much love to you all. And we're going to try to do these once every other month. So we should have one in April, should be the next one. And if you have any ideas of what you'd like us to cover, we're kind of jotting some ideas down now to get it prepared, but let us know what you'd like to talk about. And we'll bring in some other guest speakers as well who have knowledge in pro wrestling and in mental health. So we're trying to advance this on a regular basis and make it more important. So we have more systems and structures in place for us as professional wrestlers, and we can take care of our mental health, which will improve our whole lives. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful night, and much love.
Love yourself.
Yes. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.